I'm Madelyn Blair. On today's show, we'll be talking about drumming. Yes, drumming. And we'll be talking with two award-winning drummers, Haywood-Smith and Ron Goad. Each offers us a gem, which I will highlight in Grounds for Thought. So stay tuned to the very end. Thank you for joining me today. I'm Madelyn Blair, and this is Unlocked, a show all about helping you recognize your own agency to be the resilient leader in you. Unlocked is a place where I bring people who can offer different perspectives and strategies to enhance your life and work. In every case, we take the lessons and show how they can be directed to business, sometimes quite unexpectedly. Artists see the world differently. And when they are a part of our teams, we benefit by the kind of questions they ask, by the creativity and innovation they seem to inspire in the team. And when you're trying to solve a tough business problem, you need all the creativity and innovation you can get. I'm excited today to bring an artist who lives his life in music as a professional drummer. But wait, I'm actually going to bring you two professional drummers, each of them devoted to music and drumming. I know little about music and nothing about drumming. So I'm anxious and excited to see what I am going to learn. I'm also anxious because due to technical difficulties, I had to bring one of them on only through audio. Moreover, I had to do the recordings at different times. Not to worry, we've woven their two responses together. I've done it as smoothly as I can. Yet I'm certain you will see how I got it stitched together. My recommendation is to focus on the content, which is simply amazing. Hello, welcome to Unlocked.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
What drew you to that instrument and what has kept you there over the years?
The truth is, I think my answer starts with, I don't know. There's probably a visceral nature to playing drums that I was certainly attracted to. The facts that I mostly remember are my neighbor over the street, who was probably 10 years older than me. He played, and I must have just thought it was very cool and was keen to follow in his footsteps. In terms of learning, I think I was the first of a group of friends to do it, and probably some like early competitive nature kicked in that made me want to stay ahead of the field somewhat. And now it's hard to let go, and it's has been such a big part of me and my life that I almost feel like I can't stop, and I have no desire to stop. I'm in an interesting spot where, because I moved here for college and consequently stayed into New York afterwards to pursue a career in it, I can sort of trace everything in my adult life to having picked up a drumstick. Be that my marriage, my child that's on the way, all the personal relationships I have in New York. So I don't think many people can say that with the same clarity. Of course, a lot of people live the same existence, but I do quite like that about my story.
My second guest today is Ron Goad. He describes his life in music beginning before he was born, when his mother attended a Bing Crosby show in 1950. His exposure to music didn't stop there. His bio says, "I've enjoyed singing since I was little, particularly harmonizing after my mother told me not to step on her melodies. "Those are my notes," she said. "You find your own notes." Ron plays with local artists, award winners, and others around the country. Ron, how did you pick drumming?
Before I was drumming, I was doing classical music piano recitals. As a little kid, only up to about 11 years old, I auditioned to join what would be the high school band in the 7th grade. And before that, I passed an audition, so I could have picked any musical instrument that was lined up across the stage, and there were at least a dozen of them. And the instrument on the far left was a drum, and that's about as far as my eyes went. I was intrigued by the drum, so I picked that. I mean, I could have picked any instrument, but here, that was in 1961 I started, and then in the 7th grade, I was part of the high school band. But my main instrument, I'm known as a drummer and percussionist, including I play washboard with jug bands and Dixieland bands. And that is a cure for ego right there. When you put thimbles on your fingers and you scratch a washboard, it's so silly. And I try to emulate the sound of tap dancing, like Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. So I want people to hear tap dancing. And there's even a video of my jug band doing a song where the videographer had tap dancers, old film of tap dancers, as I'm doing a washboard solo with clickety, clickety, clickety. And it was his idea, and he got it. That's what I'm trying to do, is very often get people to picture happy feet. No matter what drum I'm playing, I like to use my own style, and I draw from whatever the song is. And I find sometimes that a song is making my hands do things that I have never done before, as simple as it may sound, just keeping a beat.
I love hearing how differently people are inspired to take up a particular road in life. I'm curious about the meaning to you of playing music.
Yeah, it's quite hard to, I find that quite a difficult thing to quantify, especially, I think we'll get onto that, about how music informs your choices, and the care with which you make those choices, but with a much broader goal in mind, which for me at that age, and still to some extent now, is that I wanted to play music and go on tour and do the thing that I've been studying and trying to do for seemingly no apparent reason for the previous however many years, since I started at 6 or 7, meant that quite a lot of the decisions I did make had a larger overarching path, keeping them informed, I suppose.
Yeah.
People keep asking me to do things, and it's hard to say no. For instance, when an Australian artist who's very popular in Australia, Ian Campbell Smith, also known as Fred Smith, he came here, and I had to try to learn to be an Australian rock and roll drummer. And those drummers in Australia, they think funny. So I had to try to adapt, and then my friend Ian lived here for several years. I ended up recording on his next 2 CDs before his wife got a job being a curator of all the government of Australia's artworks, including Aborigine artworks and treasures. He had to move back to Australia, but he took with him my drumming, so his drummers in Australia had to learn some of my beats.
Will, you play with a group called the Brit Pack. What's the story?
The Brit Pack started the year after graduation from Berklee College of Music, when me and another British friend moved to New York, and finding ourselves both out of work, we were looking for temp jobs online and found one that needed British accents for customer service. So we dutifully trekked down to Brooklyn Naval Yard and walked into a room inside a room with banks of phones and computers and sat down for a training session. And after about 10 minutes, my friend was like, "We're not doing this, I'm leaving." And I was like, "Let's just give it till break at 11." And he was like, "No." And he just got up and walked out. I was like, "Well, I'm not doing this by myself." So we both left. And he said, "Well, I've always thought like it'd be a really easy like gig would just be to play British music. Like there's so much of it and people love it." And I was like, "Oh, well, I've got a friend who's British, who's a bass player, so I can give him a call." And he was like, "Oh, I know a great singer who'd be good for it, so I'll give him a call." And we started from there. And it happened at a curious moment of my economic life, let's say, where I had no money. So we were going for like 6 weeks of a temp job at $15 an hour or something, which seemed pretty decent. And from the point of starting this band, you know, not because of the band specifically, but I've actually never really looked back in terms of having to make money from music or anything else, where if we'd gone for the temp job, 6 weeks later, we'd been like, need another temp job. So it worked out quite well for us. And we're still doing it, even probably against our own expectations. I don't think we ever thought we would keep going or get past the bars that we were playing in.
Yeah. Well, how lucky that you have made some decisions at particular points in your path, and they just seem to have been the right decisions. Ron, I understand that you know something about the Brit Pack too. Please tell us.
I looked up the Brit Pack and found them to be fascinating. They're actually half American. What's listed is 4 guys, 2 from the UK, and one of the Americans is a friend of mine, Matt Nakoa. I put on stage in Frederick, Maryland 10 years ago, and now I go see him at the Birchmere because he accompanies folk singer from the 60s, Tom Rush, who's old enough to be his grandfather. Tom Rush sometimes has Tom Paxton or other people accompany him, but very often if you go to Tom Rush's website, you'll see it'll say with Matt Nakoa. So that's a versatile musician, and one of his projects is Will Haywood-Smith's project, the Brit Pack, which I think is a misnomer because it's half American, right? So yeah, that blew my mind when I started looking at that and saying, "Well, wait a minute, that's a friend of mine. What are the odds?"
Let's see this Brit Pack in action, so that you can also see Will in action. It's a very short clip, but it's always good to know that something really exists.
Keep it coolin', baby.
Thank you. We'll be back.
That is such a powerful
Thank
little
you.
piece.
Yeah, it's one of the more fun ones to play in the set.
Yeah, and I picked that particular clip because it showed you playing.
There you go. I know, I always get chucked away at the back.
You do. I mean, even Ringo Starr had to be way in the back.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed about Will Haywood-Smith is that he's a very special, rare drummer that I'm not. He's a timekeeper. He is like a human metronome. He is very over-talented. He has more talent than he can usually use. So when he's doing the Brit Pack, he's just being like a normal drummer. And that means you're playing with musicians who are tugging at the tempo, speeding it, dragging it, speeding it, dragging it. And not only that, there's a little evil voice inside your head as a drummer saying, am I speeding up? Am I slowing down? Should I go faster? You know, but unless you have a device in front of you that works like a metronome and tells you beats per minute, then you're going to have these forces that may make you question your accuracy with the tempo. So what I found in some recordings with Will is that he's I could play that. And what he's doing on the drums is astonishing to me, astounding. And it's wow, he must rarely get to use his advanced talent that way. Well, okay, here's I struggle with, well, how much good can I do? And knowing that less is more. And how can I motivate the other musicians in my band that day? It might be a band of musicians I never met, but they heard about me and they want me to report to a place in D.C. at what time, and they talk about money. Very often I spend money to perform with people. And I've done over 700 wedding receptions and corporate gigs, tuxedo gigs with one band of 5 educators. I'm the new guy, and I joined in 1984. I'm still the new guy in that band of teachers. 2 of them have been nominated for Grammys. But what I'm really proud of is that I've drummed and harmonized on many albums that won Grammys and other awards. What does that mean? That means my drumming didn't ruin the thing. And that means the recording engineers probably enhanced my sound to make me sound better than I thought I did when I walked out of the studio hanging my head in worry. Now, what I really think of is on the way to a show, this is part of my credo. I forgive people in advance before I even get to the show. Now, whom do I forgive? Well, the musicians I'm backing up. They may be very sensitive. They may be moody. I don't know what it's like to be in their shoes. If he's a lead singer or she's a lead singer, and she's sweating it and worried about the new song or having to look at the music stand. Like a lot of people think, oh, you should memorize all your words. Well, many people cannot do that. And a lot of the most famous people in the world don't do that. So I know they may get snippy, and I forgive them in advance. I learned that as a teacher with teenagers, that sometimes they might say something rather adolescent. Well, they are adolescents. And working with 4,500 adolescents who are now between the ages of 35 and 65, I'm 74, that prepared me to work with folk singers and songwriters. So I can handle them with great care, knowing that if they say something that might hurt my feelings personally or professionally or unintentionally or intentionally, I have to put up my Star Trek deflector shields, okay? And I have to be somewhat impervious. So, yes, I do prepare psychologically not to take things too personally. And I try to be conscious of this so that I forgive in advance, and I try not to trespass on other people's boundaries. I also have to figure out to sense the expectations of others. If I'm with them, what do they expect? What do they want to get from this show or this recording? I have to sense the expectations of others, and I have to figure out, well, when is the opportunity for me to grab the steering wheel? When should I do it? Should I do it? Or should I just lie back and stay and fade into the background? But if somebody's getting up there and pouring their heart out and trying, I have to try to listen with fresh ears and watch with fresh eyes.
What are some of the struggles you face as a performer on the drums?
It's a funny question, because I've had people ask me that before, and the reality is, by that point, those are the easier gigs in many ways. So within sort of pop and rock, which is mostly what I play, there's the gigs where you're consistently playing different material or with different artists multiple times a week, that's much harder to sustain. So as an example, I played with a friend in his bar band in December just because their drummer broke their wrist, and he was like, hey, it's Tuesday, I have a gig Thursday, can you learn 30 songs? And I was like, well, sure, if you don't mind how they come out, I can do that. and it was all sort of Blink 182 and like stuff that was quite drummy, like lots of involved drum parts. That was a much harder gig than when was it? October, we played at Radio City Music Hall opening for another artist, and that comparatively, you're on a tour. You know, that was week 3 maybe, and by that point you're on autopilot almost. The pitfalls are actually just that, you know, you're asleep at the wheel because you've done it so many times. That's the real risk. And it's a funny, I'm sure this exists in other areas of business and industry, but I don't know, is that as you go up the pyramid, as it were, you're afforded more time. So in other gigs where you would normally have, you know, 2 days to learn 30 songs, when you're on tour, you've had a week to learn 10. So it's not you're not rushing, you're not pushed for time. You sort of know it intrinsically by that point, and it's a lot easier to start to deal with. And for one thing, the audience are a lot further away, so you can't really see people as clearly, which is seriously a thing. And the lights you get more lights in your eyes, so a lot of the time you feel much more disconnected when you're in a small venue and someone's sort of sat right there,
Yeah.
and they see you drop your drumstick. You're like,
You also teach drumming,
yeah.
and your website says, I place a strong emphasis on technique and efficiency, but ultimately aim to try to help each individual find their voice and best represent themselves through their playing. Now, that comment really struck a chord with me, because I remember when I was doing my dissertation, my advisor, he would read my stuff. He never told me, by the way, what I had done wrong. He only told me what I had done right. But what he kept encouraging me was, I want to hear your voice. So I'm curious how you interpret, what do you mean when you say, I want to hear your voice?
I mean, to me, it kind of cuts to the heart of what good art is in some ways, is that you need something to say, and then you need the eloquence or elegance of delivering that in a way that resonates with people. And that's not to say that you can't play poorly and convey quite a lot, or you can't, you know, there's plenty of abstract art that conveys a lot also, but it's very hard to pin down what the thing is. And I'm still, you know, I'm still a student of doing that for myself, but there are definitely, you know, it comes down to feelings and trying to get people to sort of commit to whatever it is that they're feeling. You know, kids come into contact with the drum kit and immediately just start wailing, and I tend to just let them do that for a bit, because I think there is like an inherent, firstly, that's what they're there for. So you should do that. They are loud. You should play them loud. But that basic instinct of sort of trying to just create something out of nothing is really important. Trying to hone that down to become sort of what you think represents something about you is really difficult. And the creation of music as opposed to the replication of music is even somewhat of a distinction. So we'll come on to that with playing in a band that plays all other people's music. But even in how you put across that music, you know, it's really hard to pin down, and that's a good thing too, because you're never going to fully find an answer.
I really liked that when you said, I just let them play for a while. You know, that's what children need to know, that they have agency, that the music is supposed to be coming out of them. And unless they experience it a little bit of freedom like that, they'll never know that. Ron is also a teacher. His students are already artists, and what they need is a mentor.
I want to record your song. You may have an idea of what you want me to do. I'll try that first. And then if there's time and I have other ideas, I want to implement my ideas. Since time is money, and my ideas are going to take time and cost you money, then I hand over some money. to you in the recording studio to take the time to try my idea. That's why there are many recordings and videos where I'm listed as executive producer. That simply means I put my money where my drumsticks were. If I want the recording, the performance, the arrangement to be good, then I help produce recordings. When people think they're just hiring a drummer, and I've got news for them. I've got other things in mind that may slow down the recording process to get a better recording at the end. But very often, what I try to do is, if people are complacent with mediocrity, I try to nudge them into working harder to do better. And maybe I think you can do more than you thought you could do. I can see that, but it's going to take some work. And, you want to do the show, here's the phone number of a vocal teacher. Take 3 lessons and get back to me. Yeah. Or, you're really good all by yourself on stage with your guitar and your voice. Or, you need a bass player. You need a mandolin player. You need a percussionist. I know one. So sometimes people have, in my opinion, might be a bit of a delusion of grandeur. And I'll say, you'd be better off to have somebody else sing your song. Somebody else record it, cover it.
I get the impression that drumming has a way of forming you into a different person. Am I hearing you wrong? Tell me about that.
I also think I would be a completely different human if I hadn't spent hours beating up a drum kit. And you do have to be interested in yourself a little bit. You have to be interested in people and in discovering what you're trying to get out of the thing. And I think sometimes that can get lost, particularly in societal perception of playing music, and definitely in higher education of music, where, are you in a trade school where you're trying to be able to perform things, where you're trying to put the message across? Oh, we're trying to play Brazilian music, we're trying to play jazz, here's how you do it. Or you're in an art school where it's like, whatever's in here needs to come out of here or wherever. And how do we actually facilitate that? And it depends, each musician has their own take on that. But I think it's easier I think the trade school aspect of like, okay, well, you need to go and learn 30 songs because someone's going to pay you to play a wedding is comparatively a lot easier to teach than like, okay, what are you feeling in here and how do you put it into art?
Yes.
And that's quite a daunting thing, and it requires some bravery and some introspection, which, if the whole world was forced to play drums for 2 years, we'd live in a completely different society. But sadly, the higher
we're going to have to come back to that. If everybody played drums. Oh, all right.
Or music.
All right.
I should say music. A slight bias coming through.
Slight bias. Oh, that's okay. You're allowed. You make your living by playing music. I'm curious about your thoughts on the business of music.
I'll start with the reason anyone plays music is not for money, or very rarely. It was not something I was given a lot of consideration to when I was 7 years old. It was just a desire to do it. Being, business around music is, for want of a better word, a sort of a necessary evil in many sense. A lot of people say there's no money in music and the arts, and to some extent they're true, but broadly speaking, I would say that's complete nonsense, in that, most celebrities that we, revere are musicians, actors, so there's a huge business built up around what I would assume is purely emotion. The reason that things connect with people, art, music, is because of how it makes people feel, and trying to solve that problem of who you find, how you find them, and whether you can connect with them is basically how you monetize the product. Now, is that I wouldn't want to put too much of an opinion on whether that's a good system or a bad system. It's always existed in some form. It was before, the version of capitalism we have now. Composers had patrons. Society worked just in a different way. I don't think that was a better system per se. But I am fortunate to be able to afford to be able to live life off the back of creating music, and so I always feel a little anxious criticizing it, but there is also a lot that it leaves on the side of the road in its sort of pursuit of pushing bigger artists to bigger audiences. And I do think we're at a really interesting point where, with someone like Taylor Swift, eventually you can't get more audience members, right? Like there's not the capacity, there's not enough people in the in places in the world. Eventually, the same with, I wonder that about Netflix. How do you grow a company where eventually there are only 8 billion people in the world? If they all subscribe to Netflix, what happens to your business model? What's the growth plan when you have everyone subscribe? So it's very tough, and the business exists in part because as a reflection of the people who are in the performing sector, who are not inclined towards business. So you kind of can't live without it, and it's challenging to live with it. There are a lot of musicians who are just pure and simple artists and are not concerned about making a huge fortune or necessarily connecting with more than a few hundred people, and who aren't cut out for understanding how to market, how to do profit and loss or whatever. So we do need a music business, and I don't want to make it sound like I don't want it, but I do have my issues with what I like to call music adjacent people, who I think generally have good intentions and feel a lot about music, but there's a huge gulf between liking music and wanting to work in music, and it's not a salaried thing, it's a day rate, and people just forget that within the structure of day-to-day life, like that's not what most people's existence is like as musicians. So I deal with a bit of both in terms of the artist I play for, dealing with management, and a lot more in terms of when I'm working with the Brit pack, booking shows, trying to promote shows, trying to balance costs. Yeah, and Mark mostly deals with the touring and travel and sort of logistics side, and I mostly deal with the promotion, trying to sell tickets, trying to grow a mailing list. So a lot of it is very normal, boring business stuff.
Now, some people would not consider that boring. You realize that, Will.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, right. And I'm growing to find bits of it more intriguing. The sort of trying to thread the needle, but at the heart of it, I'm only doing it because I like playing music live.
Okay. Well, there's nothing like having a real goal that will energize you to do that kind of work that's not necessarily the most pleasant or the thing that you would
absolutely
prefer.
And we all have a stake in the band, so that's where playing in a cover band is kind of a bizarre arrangement, because if I'm on tour with an artist, it generally works out that you just get a flat day rate and a per diem. Sometimes that day rate is just for a day of performance. Sometimes if you're traveling, you get paid less because you're not actually doing any work that day, but it varies a lot. And whatever they get paid at a gig, which is usually works with a guaranteed offer, say they make $5,000 for selling however many tickets, and then there's a bonus, you just get your flat rate no matter what. So I got paid the same for playing to 5,000 people at Radio City as I did the next 2 days later for playing to 400 in Nashville.
Ron is at the other end of his career and sees himself very much as a mentor, coach to others.
My plan B turned out to be really, really good because my organization, Songwriters Association of Washington, SAW.org, put 15 award-winning songwriters into a recording studio to record their award-winning songs from scratch, just without a big production. Like just, I know you had a full band on that recording and you won, but let's see what happens when you just put on a guitar and sing into the microphone. And one of the award winners asked me to play along, and she had Ken Avis from he's from Liverpool. He's a Liverpudlian. So here we are, three of us on stage. We've never played together before, and we're going to do his song, and I gave it kind of a calypso beat. And the recording came out really well, but the point was we wanted these people to have a chance to be among peers in this huge studio that has more Grammys than a studio in Rockville where Prince, the Beach Boys, and so many people had recorded. The point was to give these recording artists I wanted them to be able to leave the studio with an audio and video recording of themselves performing their song. So the people left there feeling pretty good about themselves. And many of them had recorded in small studios or with homemade equipment, but now they know the difference.
Ron works with the music of the artist. Will, you and the Brit Pack can choose the songs you play. Since people have heard the music before, how do you distinguish yourself to your audience?
Well, yeah, this is sort of the eternal issue of a cover band, is that you don't hold the inherent value yourself, right? There are no royalties to being in a cover band, right? I don't own the music, which, that also negates the major problem of being in an original band, is you have to create something of value out of nothing, which we talked about before, and that takes a lot of time. So we're skipping that part because we know the product is popular already. We're just taking songs that people really, really like, and then just the set list is just like hit, right? Even major artists can't necessarily do that. There's always like hit, song from the B side, song from the old album, hit, really old hit, So we are quite fortunate in that sense. In terms of how we're marketing it, the good thing is it's primarily a nostalgia based thing. You're trying to market an experience that people can sort of hark back to. We love the music and we play the songs that we like, and we just try and make it sound as good as possible. And that's got us quite far, but we have definitely come to a point where we're like acknowledging that just doing a great job and sort of saying our musical product is, in our opinion, objectively slightly better than this other musical project doesn't actually sell tickets. Mm-hmm. So then it's an appeal to, other senses of like, is it a spectacle? Does it look like people are having fun? Like, so then you have to put your sort of professional biases to the side of being like, right, but we sound really good. No one cares. Everyone who's already doing this is over the threshold of good enough, right? And then what differentiates the top is how you connect with people in the show, before the show. And that's a different challenge. And also because it's inherently based around music, there is some X factor of you don't really know why people like these songs in the first place. They just do. Mm-hmm. And then how do you market to someone who you're not sure why they like it?
And I think your other point, how you connect with people before the show and during the show. I know as a speaker, that's one thing that you're always concerned about. And I'll never forget one of the coaches that I studied under. He would say, you just pick one person and you talk to that one person. And he said, believe it or not, the rest of the audience thinks you're talking to them. And I had to just believe him.
Yeah.
But I don't know as a musician whether that's possible.
Well, that kind of, yeah. I mean, those connections during the show of how do you take an audience with you and not just have them say, yeah, that was a good show, glad I saw that, and never see you again. It comes down to a level of authenticity too, of how much you care about the music. And we, for a long time, were just, well, we obviously like the music, otherwise we wouldn't be playing it. And we go out on stage and play it, and people presumably know that we like this music. You know, it requires you sort of drawing a bit of a narrative as to why we're there, because a lot of people just assume that, you know, if it pays the bills, then you would do it. Well, it never paid the bills at the moment of conception, but we still wanted to do it. If you just perform the music and then walk off stage, people go like, all right, that was cool, see you never. So and overcoming that, especially as a British person, where we're not as prone to sort of speaking our emotions and trying to connect with people, from the four of us as like students of music and keen professionals, it was like, here's the product, you presumably are going to like this because it's very good. And that's not how it works. So we're still overcoming that, and I think we're getting better at it, but you know, it's always a work in progress.
Oh, this has been very interesting to hear how you have described the reason you do this. So I thank you for that. Ron, you have talked about how you respond to authenticity and its impact on the audience. I know that is part of why you do what you do.
Yeah, also because I've seen people improve. Yeah. And sometimes I've motivated them to try harder, improve, and then they'll tell me, like, years later, or I run into somebody in Sarasota, Florida. I say, Ron, you put me on stage in Frederick, Maryland, 2007, and your encouragement made me go on. That's right. There was a young lady named Rebecca Berlin Presti, who I put on stage in Frederick in 2006, and her sister Stephanie, and then they disappeared. Stephanie Berlin went to New England to play church music, and Rebecca Berlin stopped playing for 12 years. And then when I ran into her at Beatles at a show Saul put together, I thought, is this the same person, Rebecca Berlin? And now she's added Presti to her name. And I walked up to her and I requested a song that she played in 2007 or 8. And that's when she decided not to give up. She had come back to music, and now she's like Focus Music's emerging artist. Wow. And she's probably 40 years old now, but she took 12 years off. And she said, when Ron Goad requested a song, I knew he remembered my song. And I thought, I must be worth something. Yes. So that was a surprise. You never know when you're going to, you know, say something nice that will really, encourage someone who needed that. And to me, it was so easy, you know. All I had to do was walk up and say, you know, I don't know what songs you're going to do, but I'd sure like to hear you do that one.
I want to come back to this, everybody should play drums, and we'd be a different...
We come back to the ideas of utopia after we discuss where we are right now. I mean, I think a lot of it, the idea of a declining middle class in music comes back to the idea that discovering yourself and your values and your style is simply not a thing everyone can afford. And that's a question of how much we value it, how much we allow people the space and time to discover that. You know, higher education, what your perception of that differs depending where you're from. You know, the US, because of costs, is very concerned about return on investment for it. But I've never considered higher education to be about the thing that you're learning, particularly. In fact, I just met up with an old drum student of mine about 2 days ago, who I taught from about 7 to 18. Really quiet kid, didn't do a lot of practice, but he kept on getting lessons, and I enjoyed hanging out with him. And when I saw him, he was suddenly like a chatty adult, where before he was always this like really, really quiet. I thought I liked his personality. He was quite funny, but it took me years for him to open up. And 2 semesters in college, and it was like a different human. And I was like, "How are your grades?" He's like, "Oh, I'm C's get degrees." And I was like, "Perfect." Whatever he's got out of university, I'm sure he's getting more than just a chatty personality. But the experience was much more than just what he's learning, and that's not a thing that anyone is able to afford anymore. Especially in music, especially in the arts. There's so little obvious return on investment after the fact, and it's, in my opinion, sort of the ultimate free market in many ways is music. After you graduate, and it's like, okay, go and make some money. It's like figuring that out is really, really difficult. So if you want to sit in your room and write some music, that's fine, but I also want to hear that music, and I think the broader base of working musicians has grown in the last 100, 200 years. But the question of like, who are we actually hearing from in terms of those musicians, I think that is shrinking.
Well, as an accompanist and somebody who tries to make a show or a recording better, I consider this. I made my wealth as a school teacher in Fairfax County. And so I am retired. I was Warren County High School's top math student, but now I don't do math at all. And I don't care about money. So I weigh each situation individually according to how enriching it might be for me and how much good I might be able to do you. I get more pleasure out of music, and sometimes people young enough to be my grandchildren will ask me to accompany them, and I think, wow, what an opportunity.
All right, I want to come back now to, if everybody was a drummer, the world would be a different place.
I had this thought a few years ago, and I just thought, like, if you put 100 billion a year into everyone playing music, drums, the sort of positive externalities of that you would get would just be, difficult to quantify. And I think that's, again, cuts to the chase of like, if you take away the money from art, hopefully all you're left with is positive externalities. Right? There's not really a reason to make it, which is kind of the best reason of all.
Say that again.
Well, there is no reason to make art, as far as I know, and therefore that's maybe the best reason to make it.
Thank you. Will Haywood-Smith, this has been such an interesting conversation. I want to thank you so much.
Of course. No, it's been a pleasure.
Oh, good. And I still have in my mind this image of every child becoming a drummer. And what comes to my mind is what a great way to express the energy that children are filled with.
Yeah.
And so it makes noise, but it makes noise.
It's the oldest instrument out there,
That's right.
So.
That's right. Thank you, Will. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Every now and then, there is something that changes how I think about the world. Grounds for Thought is a place where I talk about these moments so that you can explore the meaning for yourself. Will Haywood-Smith said that he let his new students just play on the drums, just for a little while, before he began teaching them. How many times did you get introduced to a new system and was told to take some time to play with it before you begin in earnest? Over the years, I think I have had to learn well over 100 new systems. I dare not try to count them. Most often, my play was trying to make them work to do something that I needed right then, And if I had some time, I couldn't really play on all the dimensions. For example, I've had to learn 5 separate systems over the course of the 6+ years I've been doing this show. And the worst of it was I could never do that final step of broadcasting until it was in real time. It takes energy, discipline, commitment, and a belief that you can actually figure things out. Do we really take this into account when we change things for our staff? When you change things for yourself? Today, having recognized all that is involved, I plan on playtime when I have to introduce a new approach or system. What I have found is that it gives staff a chance to feel some ownership of the system. When they have to use it in earnest, it is much better from the very beginning. Ron Goad said his goal is always to help the other person know that he sees their capability and their potential. He shares that with them so that they know they are being seen. He is so clearly a person who sees the value of relationships, using his own observations to take into account what he is seeing and hearing, and then sharing that with the other. Teams work so well when each member takes time to share the value each brings to the team. In business, we talk a lot about teamwork, yet often reward competition. Competition is supposed to bring out the best. Yet, to Goad, and certainly in my own experience, when team members feel recognized for what they bring to the table, they seem to dig just a little deeper to bring the very best they have. I've watched lackluster teams shine when they took the time to recognize what others bring to the table. Haywood-Smith said he was able to begin studying drums from the time he was 6. Started because he liked the drums that the kid across the street played. But the real factor was that he studied drums all his young life and continued formally at the Berklee School in Boston. He learned to perfect his craft through study and practice. That means he was given time and resources to learn. We tend to enjoy what we do well. I wonder if some of Will's joy comes from doing something that he does well. Watch your own staff. Watch your own staff when they're doing what they do well. Do you see the difference? What might be useful to do for Watch your own staff when they're doing what they do well. Do you see the difference? What might be useful to do for the things they don't do as well? Training, practice, mentoring, coaching, opportunity. As they become more competent, they actually will become more confident. And confident staff are more able to tell you what they see and do so accurately. Now, that's ROI. I loved how Goad transcribed experimenting with thimbles on a washboard to produce the sound of tap dancers. He experimented and found a sense of achievement as he listened to his attempt and heard what he was trying to achieve. He started playing the drums around 11, and today he has developed his skills through constant practice. Yet he continues to learn through experimentation to achieve challenging goals. 2 very different drummers with different stories, different reasons to play, different styles, different times in their lives, but each demonstrate that learning is lifelong. It's a lifelong practice, study, practice, experiment, practice, and practice all the time. Yet with all their excellence and awards, Haywood-Smith and Goad each work as members of an ensemble, a team that only exceeds limits when they act as an ensemble. I didn't anticipate that this show would be about teamwork and learning. It has, and how appropriate for the one instrument that doesn't carry the melody, but provides the foundation of the melody, the beat. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation and learned something new. If you aren't already on my mailing list, please stop by my website and register for it on the contact page. I want to hear what's on your mind. And if you're on YouTube, click the like button. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe. This helps me, and it helps others who are looking for similar information. I'm Madelyn Blair, wishing you infinite possibilities as you unlock your resilient leader.